examiner for Industry Canada. So that was the start of my amateur radio. Flying wise, I started in high school, and I got into my private and then my commercial when I was 18. I became a bush pilot. That means flying helicopters and float planes up north. That's nice, but it's seasonal. So I slowly worked my way into the airline industry, and I've been with one of the major airlines here in Canada for the last 25 years. And as Barry said, I'm now flying the 787, which is a Dreamliner. And for those that are not familiar, it's about a 300 passenger with a different configuration. So it's a beautiful airplane. It's still in production. It was made or designed and came out in 2012. And it has extremely long legs. We can go pretty much one stop anywhere around the world. I spend a lot of my time over in India, and in South America seems to be the routes that I get, and over into Korea and sort of the Asian market. So a lot of people ask me, how do we get around? How does that all work with HF and the radios itself? So I thought the best way to explain it is we use a multitude of radios and tools within the, to our disposal. We have VHF AM. We have 3 of them. 2 of them are used for voice. One's used for data. And data would be used for the ACARS. And that's basically a telex text message, basically. And we get our clearances, our weather, any updates from our flight dispatch comes through that system. And that's good, of course, line of sight, so about 200 miles. On top of that, in the last sort of 10 years with the onset of better satellite and whatever, we're now using a thing called CPDLC, which is Controller Pilot Data Link. And that is basically through satellite, the air traffic controllers can talk to us via text and give us our clearances and whatever else we need through that. With the HF comes into play when we're now offshore or beyond a line of sight for VHF AM. So a typical flight for me would be, let's say like I just did the other day, I went to Dublin, Ireland. We launch out of Toronto through 10,000 feet. We log into our CPDLC, which is a computer protocol, as I mentioned. Toronto hands us off to Montreal. Montreal hands us off to the Moncton control, and then over to Gander, so into Newfoundland. When we're about 100 miles offshore, domestic Gander has us call Oceanic Gander, which is the guy that's going to give us our HF assignments. So we switch, we have dual HF radios. We're good from about 2 to 28 megs on that. We can't go lower than 2, I think 2.1, I believe. Not that it matters, we don't go typically that low. But from there, they would give us an assignment. They always give you a primary and a secondary just for conditions. As we know, some days you can be on 40 and you can't hear anybody, or 80 is good, or vice versa. So they give you a sort of a high frequency and a low frequency depending on the time of day. And they ask you to do a check-in or a cell call check. And cell call is just as that, it's a selective call. And you'll call, in this case, Gander. And it's very simple. It's just Gander, Gander. It's airline 123, CPDLC. And when you say that, they now know your fuel, where you're going, your altitude, your true airspeed, everything that they used to keep a very close watch on. If you change your Mach by 0.1%, you have to advise them. Well, now that's all taken care of through the computers and the data that's transmitted every 5 seconds back and forth. So what the HF used to do has now, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess it depends, taken a back seat in so much as we use it as a redundancy. We'll ask for a cell call check. Each aircraft has a 4-letter letter to it. It could be A, B, C, D, doesn't matter what it is. It allows, I think, 12,000 variables to it. And what they do is on that frequency that they'll give you, you assuming you can hear them. If not, you go to the secondary or the standby frequency. And you talk to Gander, you say, requesting cell call check. And what he does is just like a DTMF, like we would in amateur radio if you want to open up a repeater, or if you're using IRLP or anything like that. You would simply, he would simply key it in, whatever the lettering is, the 4 letters that your aircraft has, and we'll get a dial tone, kind of a beep, bop, and it sets off an alarm and a light in the cockpit. And we simply say cell call check, okay, and we turn off our HF radio. We turn off the audio to it. I mean, it's still running in the background. And what that allows us to do is to not have to listen to the static or the crashes, or some of those ocean crossings could be 10 or 12 hours. And you know what it's like to listen to HF. Imagine having to sit there and hear that noise for hours and hours and hours. So The reason for that is we can be moving along. Let's say there's traffic, there's weather, they want to reroute us. They simply send us a DTMF tone, rings the alarm. We come up on frequency on the HF once again, and it's basically, yeah, you rung us. What do you want? And they're like, okay, we need to move you up or down 1,000 feet due to traffic. You comply and you carry on. Again, with the new modern aircraft and the onset of the CPDLC, which is continuously being rolled out, that's sort of the whole HF thing is kind of gone by the wayside. They now send us via satellite through our computers. They will send us a note and say, climb to, let's say we're at 38, they'll say, climb to 39,000. And it's so automated nowadays that we simply accept it. It loads it into the standby of my altimeter. I press an accept button. It puts it into the computer and the aircraft climbs. The throttles go to full thrust and up we go. So we no longer rely on the HF like we once did. It's still there. I have dual HF. One is set for voice. The other is set for data. And we can do data just like we can on VHF AM. They can send us stuff such as our weather, our alternate stuff, load numbers, whatever we need. So we do use HF. It's still a viable secondary backup. In the Middle East, like when I go to Mumbai, we do use it from when we pass overhead sort of the sandbox area into India. We are all on HF, although it's such a crowded area and so many people trying to talk, you actually can't make any real contact on it, but it is the means of typically communicating with us. So that's really in a nutshell what the HF does. Now the HF radio, everyone asks me, how does it, what is it? So it's a Collins. Collins makes as far as I know, makes almost all aircraft equipment radios. It puts it about 400 watts. Unfortunately, the radio itself is located in the E&E, which is the electronics and engineering bay down below us. And there's all the radios, all the computers that fly the airplane are in there. So we don't actually see it. We just have a control head, and I can select the frequency. And it's all automatic or automated, I guess. I hit the mic button. It does a little low wattage. You'll hear it. It tunes up the frequency automatically. The antenna is in the leading edge of the rudder, so it's about a 50-foot or 60-foot long antenna with a tuner, and that's it. There's no selectivity. I can't do anything if it's noisy. I'm not able to use anything to remove noise or what have you. It's very, very basic. Simply select it. The radio has AM, which we don't use, and it has upper sideband, at least on the 787. Some of you might have heard me talk to you on, I know I've spoke to Gene on 40 and 80. I was on a different aircraft, the smaller aircraft, the Airbus 220 or the Bombardier. It does have both upper and lower sideband. I don't know why we don't use lower sideband in anything in aviation. So I don't know why they equipped it. I guess they just did, and that's the way it is. I've never seen it before, and I've never seen it since. So I'm not able to get on to the 40 or 80 anymore on lower. I could do it in upper or AM. And that's just the way the aviation, the design of the band plan is for us. So that is it. Really, it's not that complex. We get our oceanic clearance, we get our oceanic HF assignments, and we make sure it's working. We make sure they can hear us, and we turn it off. We wait till we get to 30 West, which is about to be in the Azores, and they say contact Santa Maria or Scottish, and you call those guys, same thing, another cell call check. They make sure it's working, and then we coast into the, whether it's Scotland, Ireland, or England, depending where we're going. Once you're within about 200 miles of shore, they send us a note on the computer. They say, contact such and such on VHF, and we turn the HF radios off again. So with that, that's why those who spoke to me, I mean, Barry and I've had many QSOs. I can use HF prior to getting to the ocean, and I can use the HF after I've come off the ocean, because we are utilizing them in the background, even though they're not really being talked on. They're sitting there waiting and idling for that cell call check should it be needed. And that's why the actual ocean crossing itself, I don't get on HF to talk on the amateur bands. So that really is how we do it. So Barry, anything else you want me to explain?
There you go.
Okay, do you hear me, Captain Rob?
Yeah, I can hear you, Barry.
Okay, what is the origin of AM radio in aviation?
I don't actually know why the origin. I think AM came out first. Now, all aircraft are equipped with AM and not FM, and the reason for that is FM has capture effect. So if two people are talking on FM, whoever has either the stronger signal or is closer to the receiving station will hear the other. Will hear the tower, or the tower guy will hear the closer aircraft or the more power output aircraft. And that's not really desirable in aviation. You want to know that you didn't hear the fellow. And I mean, I'm looking at Gene there. I know he's a pilot. And when two people transmit at the same time on AM, you just get a bunch of noise, and neither person are heard, or it's just kind of like we just say, "Oh, you're doubling," like we would on the amateur bands. But the controller simply knows and say, "Okay, there's two on at once. Who was the WestJet guy, or who was the Air Canada guy?" So they know that they heard somebody, but nobody won the race, or nobody's wondering like, hey, did they hear me, or they didn't hear me, or they're ignoring me, or do I have a radio issue? So they didn't want to go to FM, and for that, number one. And the other thing is I mean, aircraft have been, Gene's airplane, I think, what is it, a 40 or 1945? I forget, it's an older one, as my airplane is. It would cost millions and millions of dollars for every airliner. Don't forget, I mentioned earlier, we have 3 radios of just the VHF. If you had to remove them, have them type certificated to be, meeting the criteria for an install in an aircraft, and there has to be a fair amount of testing and shielding, it would be probably, I would speculate, millions and millions of dollars to retrofit the entire world of aircraft radios, Barry. So does that answer that question?
It certainly does. Do we have anybody from the floor here with any questions for the captain? You do come on up and talk in the mic. Okay, how about our Zoom membership? I know, good to see you, Gene, B3IJD. Have you got any questions for Captain Rob?
Just unmute it, Gene.
Yeah, we're not getting you, Gene.
Okay. How about you, Gary? You got any questions?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me, Rob?
Yeah, I sure can. Loud and clear.
Okay. I'm just a little curious. I know you guys don't fly formation, but is there any inter-aircraft communication ever?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, actually. Once we leave line of sight of let's say, Gander in this flight that I was mentioning, we go through a checklist and a bunch of different things, but we tune radio number 1 to emergency, which is 121.5. So every airliner over the ocean, and when you think you're out there over the water by yourself, if any of you use that flight radar 24 or whatever, you'll see there's not one airplane. There's 20 or 30 all around the area. We're 1,000 feet a stack apart, like stacked. So there's a guy at 33, there's a guy at 34, there's a guy at 35, and we're all going the same direction, and a lot of us go to the same place. So we have 121.5, which is the emergency frequency on radio 1. And then we have an air-to-air, and that's 12345. That would be equivalent of like 146.52, basically, for ham radios. So we also have radar on board, and I can see you above me and below me. I think my radar goes up 2,500 feet and below 2,500 feet, and it gives me your call sign, your altitude, your true airspeed. So if you're above me, Gary, I can see your airline, and let's say it's British Airways. So your call sign is BAW, whatever. I can go, hey, the Speedbird 1,000 feet above me at 30 West. It's WestJet 123, and you're like, yeah, what do you want? And I'm like, okay, what kind of turbulence are you having? What's the wind? Do you have a headwind, tailwind, or what is it going on? So we're able to talk air to air, and that's on radio 2. Radio 1 would be if you had to, let's say, you had a pressurization or an emergency descent or an engine failure, and you have to come off that track, the North Atlantic track, or the NAT, they call it. There's a guy right below you, and there's a guy right above you. If you lose an engine, now the procedure is you turn 30 degrees off and you descend 500 feet and you offset by 5 miles. That's stuff you have to know. And but you're going to start screaming on 121.5 because these guys are going to peel off to the other side probably because they don't know how quick you're coming down and how quick the airplane, because you do it with the computers. And you need to get out of there. And if you can't sustain altitude, and usually sort of a good round number for the airliners is about 27,000 feet where you're going to start to have enough thrust from one engine to carry on. So if you're at 39,000, you're going to lose 10,000 feet, and you're amongst all these guys. So you got to get out of the way, and that's why you're going to start yelling on 21.5. Yeah, exactly, Gary. Get out of the way. We're coming down, and you must go. The ETOPS, which is extended twin engine operation, starts at 29,000 and it goes up to 60,000. And that's where now, obviously, we're not up at 60, but there are some guys at 510, and that's where all those procedures come in. So you have to descend if you had a pressurization or an engine failure and you can't sustain or can't maintain altitude. You got to get off the ETOPS airspace or out of it. You got to descend below 29,000 feet, figure out your critical point. Don't forget, halfway is not necessarily the shortest distance with headwinds. If you have 100 or 50 or 150 knot headwind and you're halfway, you're not actually time-wise. You need to turn around and do a 180 and go back. So those things we consider, that's taken all into it. Again, with the computers, we don't use the HF for this. The computers, we can also send out an SOS or an emergency thing through the computers that would also tell them where we are and what's going on with our altitude and headings, so they can predict where we're possibly going. So yeah, that's what we do use those two radios for oceanic, Gary.
Good, thank you very much.
Barry?
Gene, B3IJD, how about unmuting your mic and saying something to the group? Can't do it, okay. Let's just go around the Zoom presentation that I see. We've got just people's names. How about one at a time, maybe come in and introduce yourself. Let's start with Mike. Mike, come on in.
Hello, good evening to everybody. My name is Mike. I'm a new member. This is my first meeting with you guys. And I'm just here to listen and to learn. No questions. So I can see this is recording, which means I'm going to be able to go a few times to catch what is important, what is not for me in the future. From beginner, I think this is enough.
All right, thanks, Mike. Thanks for joining.
Welcome aboard, Mike. Okay, next is Wayne, and who is Wayne? Can you unmute your mic, Wayne, and say hi to us? No, I guess he can't. How about Chris, B3MCX? Come on in if you can. Okay, John B, that's oh, I know who that is. That's B3RWB. Come on in, John, if you can.
I can see you, Johnny.
You know who that is, Captain Rob, don't you?
Oh yes, I can recognize him. I met him at one of the Hamfests. Okay. And I don't know if you saw Barry Jean put up he typed in there saying his mic is hooked to his to a headset thingy. That's why he's not able to transmit. So he's not able to talk.
Hey, anybody else wishing to talk to Rob?
Just want to ask something.
Oh, yes. Here's a new club member. This is VA3WHU.
Victor Alpha 3 Whiskey Hotel uniform. Actually, the call sign stands for West Ham United, my favourite soccer team from the British Isles. I have a question for you. How often do you fly to India do you fly from Toronto to India? How long is the flight? I'm just curious because I speak to a lot of Indian whales every day in Mumbai and Hyderabad and different areas of India. So you mentioned you were flying with India to India at a time, and I'm just curious as to how long the actual flight takes, if there's a stopover on the way, and just a curious quick question. Thank you.
A very good question. We service India when the monsoon season is not on, and it's just starting. So we've pulled out of India as of mid-March. It'll start back up in October. Apparently it rains there for 3 months and we can't get in, but they do daily flights out of Toronto. It used to be nonstop. It was about 14 and a half hours. But we follow the Great Circle route. So what that means is, even though you think you're going to go due east, you actually go quite a ways north, way up into Labrador, over mid-Greenland, Iceland, and down through Ukraine and in. Unfortunately, there's a war on, and we can't fly through any of the Ukrainian or Russian airspace. It's all blocked off for us. So we're not able to make it nonstop. So we now go Toronto to London, England. We overnight. The crew, the pilots and flight attendants, we jump off in London. The passengers will stay on, and a new crew, a fresh crew that's been pre-positioned there, will take over. They'll carry on to Mumbai, which is about another 10.5-hour flight from there. Again, because of the war, we have to go over Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey. We fly right down the Persian Gulf with Saudi on the one side and Iran and Iraq on the other, Dubai goes right underneath us, over the Indian Ocean, and then in. It's quite a flight. It's fairly complex airspace. And as a result of the war, there's a lot of GPS, their global positioning system, which is what we're using for navigation, in sort of a redundancy with our INSs, inertial nav systems. They're now what they call spoofing us, and they're making our GPSs think we're elsewhere, trying to get us to fly into Iranian and Iraqi airspace. So quite often we'll be 30, 40, 50 miles off course. And this has been going on since last fall. So what we have to do is actually turn off our navigation system, our GPSs, and go on raw data feeding from our from VORs, a very high frequency nav aids, and the INSs, the inertial, until we get through that airspace, till we get sort of south of Dubai, and then we can switch them back on again because of that. So for me, it's a 7-day pairing. So I go Toronto, London, overnight, 24 hours. Next day, I go London, Mumbai, and that's a pretty hard run. We're there for 48 hours. We could then go back to London, another 24, back into Toronto, and we're done. That equates to about 34, 35 hours of time, and we only fly about 80 a month. So you can see I do 2 of those a month, and I'm almost at my max for the month. And so for like October, November, December, and January, that's all I did was back and forth to Mumbai, and that was my month. So excellent question, thank you.
Time to go sometime soon. I've been invited to go to India with my YL friends. There's a YL group that meets every day on Echolink, local time 8:30 to 9 a.m. It's a YL net. And on Saturdays, it's a OMYL net. So if anybody's on Echolink and they want to go jump on the India conference and meet some nice people, they'll be more than welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, David Coffee, VA3COF. I just had a question on the antenna up there. What do you run on the aeroplane?
Sorry, it's okay. So the real answer for the antenna, obviously, is it's located in the leading edge of the rudder. Sometimes, I guess I've been a bit of a smart aleck in my past days, and I've told people I have like 24 gauge copper wire, and I flushed it out the toilet, and I had a spool of it, and surprisingly, actually, if you believe me, so I stopped saying it because I didn't want to cause people to maybe start reiterating this and telling folks that that's how we do it. But I mean, in the old days, I guess they did actually have a spool that they put out for doing remote sensing and what have you. But it's all internal. It's very, very slick. The automatic tuner is almost instantaneous. You know, I simply key up a second or two, and it's gotten, you know, it's a 1-to-1 SWR, and it's quite amazing. I don't really know what the pattern is for the antenna. I don't know if it favors off the nose, off the tail, or what have you. When we're going, let's say, eastbound across the ocean, I mean, obviously the controllers are behind us. It works fine there. When we get halfway across, we switch to the controllers in front of us, and it seems to work fine there. So I can't really see any directivity or any you know, sort of nulls or whatever on the antenna, which is kind of shielded behind the aluminum of the leading edge of the rudder there, if that sort of describes it.
Yeah. Anybody else with a question? Come on up. Give your call sign.
Sure thing. Okay, it's good day. It's Edward, BYT, and I guess I'm wondering, what's the most unlikely or perhaps rarest contact you might have made completely unexpectedly while flying the plane?
Oh boy, you know, I used to, like, I've been doing this, I guess, since 2006 when I switched onto the wider airplanes that had HF, and I do some flights sometimes, and I would get, like, I come back home and I'd get 50 or 80 QSL cards. It became almost overburdening because I'd get all these cards and everyone wanted a reply, and you know, now I'd sometimes have to fill out 100 100 cards on my day off. So, but I've run into some interesting people. More so, I guess I've talked to other aircraft. I've talked to you know, helicopter guys in the jungle, and I used to be based in Ecuador. I flew helicopters in the jungle down there, so it was interesting talking to guys that did a similar job. I did have a QSO with another airliner in Australia, and Well, just talking to you guys. I mean, I talk to Barry regularly, Gene quite often on HF. A bunch of the guys, John. I don't know. I guess I've talked to you, Johnny, and other people. And I guess yeah, I spoke to my son on HF, air mobile to air mobile, because my son's also a pilot. So yeah, I don't know if anyone's famous or noteworthy, but yes, when you say air mobile after your call sign, sometimes I will get a bit of a pile up depending on conditions. So it can be fun. Sometimes, we're starting a descent, we have to figure out our approach, and I've got to go through the programming. I've got to cut it short, but other times I've got an hour or two, and I'll make 100 contacts. It can be quite a pile up for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Is the given call sign on a flight like that? Like, do you have like a special call sign that you use, or?
No, he just uses his own call sign, aeronautical mobile.
Oh, okay.
V3RMG aeronautical. Is that correct, Ron?
Yeah, you're right. Just my call sign / or stroke Alpha Mike or air mobile. Yes.
Okay. Well,
Look, Gary's got a question. Barry.
Our club. Oh, hang on.
Gary's got a
Next.
Just a short one, Gene. Do you use HF in your private flying at all?
No.
Okay.
Can't hear us? Can you hear us?
Johnny, RWB, you're up next. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm just wondering, how far does 80 meters work when you're going east, Rob?
Oh, that's like, just when you're at home, John, sometimes you can talk, all kinds of distance. I mean, people say, oh, you're up at 35 or 40,000 feet. I mean, the departure angle is still whatever, mathematically 17 degrees or something like that. The big thing is I don't have any noise. I'm not getting any noise from the city or hydro lines or anything at all like that. But I can't honestly say if the band is open where you could talk to, let's say, Europe on 80, and I'm above you at 35,000 feet, I could talk to them on 80 as well. I've not seen any appreciable difference in how far I can go because I'm air mobile. It doesn't seem to really make that much of a difference. If the conditions are good, it's good. If it's not, it's not. And on that, talking, a lot of people say, oh, do you carry a handheld? And I used to bring a little, I don't know, I got a VX7R, something like that, a little, Yaesu thingy, dual band or tri-bander. And I would go on 146,520. And people, oh, you can talk for 1,000. No, it doesn't work that way. Your maximum range is about 200 miles just due to the curvature of the earth at altitude. That's at like 40,000 feet. So if you're lower than that, it's not going to be that as far. But you've got so much electronics, brewing down below you. There's all kinds of RF. The windshields are electronically heated. I found I could talk to about 50 miles to about 100 miles because after 100 miles, it attenuated. And if it was closer than 50, it was sort of coming under the nose because the antenna, of course, is just, rubber ducky. And I'm going through the windshield and going through all the electronics in front. And it was absolutely dead off the back end of the aircraft. I couldn't hear anybody once I, was within 20, 30 miles of them. So at 500 miles an hour, you only had a 5 or, a couple minute window to speak to somebody. And then secondly, if you go on any frequency that there's a repeater, you're tripping 4 or 5 repeaters in the, all around. And I don't think people like that too much. So I actually stopped carrying an HT because it just wasn't, it wasn't that great. And so, yeah, I just don't bring it anymore, John.
Well, you and I have talked 80 meters when you were up kind of west of Sudbury.
Yes.
And that was like you were coming in here 5'9", no problem. And then all of a sudden you dropped out.
Yeah, I am going away from you in that case at 500 miles an hour. And, the change of day, the atmospheric conditions and stuff like that, things are moving a little quicker. I've also talked to, I think, you guys from the other side of Winnipeg on 80 meter as well. So it just depends on conditions and what have you, depending where we are in the cycle. But, for HF at work, like most of our stuff is nighttime, and they'll give us, 5586 primary, secondary, 5.4 or whatever, I forget it, 9.7 or something like that. So we're in around, what are we, around the 40 meter, and I guess around the 80 meter is sort of what we're using at nighttime. So we don't get involved. Like when you write your exam for your radio license for aeronautical, it was basically give an example of a Mayday, and what would you do if you heard a Mayday, and spell your name phonetically. And then basically that was it. If you could do that, you got your license, because there was no technical, there was no Ohm's law, or how do you make or do or install. You're just an operator in the aeronautical side of things. You got to know how to run the radio. And for the frequencies, it was a simple memory thing. If the sun goes up, the frequency goes up. If the sun goes down, you go down on frequency. So I mean, that's what we do in practice on amateur radio as well. But if you're going a daytime crossing, we're on 11279, and if you're doing a night crossing, you're in 4529 or something like that. So that's how simple they keep it. And they do have beacons for the aeronautical stuff. They know what the conditions are. The air traffic controllers are plugged into those websites. And that's, again, why they always give us a primary and a secondary, just for the changing conditions, because we are moving, it's usually going from day to night on a departure, and you're exasperating that because you're going at 500 miles an hour, John.
I have to get my beam rotating, and then I can talk to you all over the world.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, back to you.
All right.
Thank
Anybody
you.
else? Okay, thanks, John.
Hey, anyone else have any questions? I think I'm gonna now turn it over to our chairman, our board chairman here, Murray, V3 Zulu Papa Victor. Did you have some final words and a thank you for Captain Rob?
We sure do, Captain. That was absolutely fabulous. We've been looking towards this for a few weeks now, but since Barry told us you were coming on, so thank you again. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. Barry, thank you for organizing it. And it's great to see, great to see Gene there, and everybody else. It was a real pleasure. Thank you so much.